Well, good afternoon then, everybody. It's good to see you all here, and we'll be looking today at life's big questions. This is our 10th session on it. And we're continuing with the subject, Has Science Disproved the Bible? Now, we have to answer this question, has science disproved the Bible? Because so much of the world believes that it has, and so much of the time science claims that it has. But, as we said last time, the answer to the question is truly no. Science has not disproved the Bible. In fact, I'd say there is no conflict between the facts of science and the Bible. However, many scientists try to explain how things happened based on evidence they see before them, and they try to use natural explanations, and mostly they avoid religion. As a result, science has no provable explanation of how life began. That's a direct result of the fact that they have not been willing to admit God to science. But it's worth pointing out that science and the Bible do have different aims. If you like, science concentrates on the nuts and bolts, while the Bible looks at the bigger picture, the long-term goals, the reasons behind creation. So the Bible doesn't explain how it says things happened. Instead, it says why things happened. It concentrates on the reason for life on earth. Now, the Bible says that God created all life. We're told that in a few different places, and it's not only that that message is repeated many times through the Bible, it's also made very clear that important people in the Bible show that they believe it too. So Jesus, for example, believed that God had created. So he says in Mark chapter 10, verse 6, from the beginning of creation, these are Jesus' words. He says, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Or another example, in Mark chapter 13, verse 19, for in those days there will be such tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now, and never will be. And it's just mentioning in passing, but Jesus assumes that God has made the world. Paul, likewise, the apostle, he believed that God had created. When he was talking to a crowd who wanted to offer sacrifices to him as a god, he stopped them and he asked them, men, why are you doing these things? We are also men of like nature with you, and we bring you good news that you should turn from these vain things to a living God who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. That's just one example. There's another also in a letter that he wrote too. He said that the creation around us is proof of a creator. So when we look for when we see a work of art, we look for an artist, don't we? When we see a building, we look for a designer. In the same way, Paul said, what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. There are many other examples we could go through as well. Creation is fundamental to the Bible. It's fundamental to what or to who God is. So we're going to look at a little bit more about creation. We sometimes hear people talk about simple cells, and so we'll look at them a little bit. Then we'll look at the eye. We'll look at its complexity and the various parts of the eye. We need them all to see well. Exodus chapter 4, verse 11, which we also look at for talking about the ear too. And in that verse, God insists to Moses that he, God, had made the eye and the ear. So we'll then hear about the ear as well. We'll hear about its complexity, the various parts of our ears that there are. and we need them all to be able to hear well. We also need to point out that creation is important to us because God promised to do a new work of creation in us individually to make us new and better people. And this is the sort of message that causes us to say that the Bible doesn't just tell us what, it explains why, and it even gives us, if you like, a spiritual how. Now, let's look then at these so-called simple cells. Cells are the basic building block of life, and all life consists of one or more of these building blocks. The very simplest forms of life are single-celled creatures, but by contrast, most forms of life consist of many cells. For example, the human body consists of about 200 different types of cells and about 37 million cells. If you started counting them, you would be nowhere near having reached the end of the counting before you died. 37 million cells. And there are many parts to a typical cell, just as, for example, a house has a kitchen, a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom, so a cell has specialised areas, and they're partitioned off for separate uses. And this diagram shows just a few of the specialised areas there for the different sorts of things that cells require. So a room in a house is also separated from the rest of the house by its walls, and then of course the door can be used to control what comes in or goes out. And in the same way, each compartment of the cell is sealed off from the rest of the cell by its own membrane, which has openings. They allow some chemicals to go in and out, and they prevent others from passing through. There are highly sophisticated systems to ensure that only the correct chemicals come in and go out of the compartments. In total, there are more than 20 different sections in a cell, and these systems must accurately regulate the movement of chemicals between each one of these sections. And inside these compartments, there are special molecular machines, each of which has a specific job to do. For example, inside the energy generating compartment of the cell, there are molecular machines like this one, whose whole purpose is to provide energy in the form of a chemical called ATP. And each compartment has its own molecular machines. One thing that it's important to remember is that every cell that has ever been discovered has all of these systems in place in order for it to survive. Here then are the facts that we know about cells. It's the basis of all life, and it's incredibly complicated. So when people talk about a simple cell, it's very much a misnomer. Each cell has to have all of the correct systems in place for it to work properly. And all of the cells that have ever been discovered have all the essential systems in place, because if they don't survive. Now we have no observable facts that can suggest that cells have ever been anything other than complete and fully functional. Nor do we have any observable facts to lead us to believe that the complex chemicals like DNA that we find within cells have ever been anything other than complete and fully functional. Now, some people have put forward various theories. People have suggested that animal cells developed from more simple yeast cells. But again, we have to remember that yeast cells are already extremely complex, and they are complete, they are fully functional. Very much far from simple. There are no observable facts that indicate that yeast cells developed into more complex cells, or in fact that they ever could. So, the theory of evolution. We looked at it last time, and we noted the lack of intermediates in the fossil record. When things appear in a fossil record, they appear fully formed. Now, if we look at animals today, that doesn't give us any evidence as to how they came into existence, does it? Except what we saw in Romans chapter 1, where Paul said that their very existence is proof that there was a creator. If you like, there was a designer. Small observable changes that we see are no evidence of the large changes that are required by the theory of evolution. There are no observable facts to suggest that the cell, the basic building block of life, has ever been anything other than complete and fully functional. So now let's move on and look at some of the parts of our body, wonderfully complex things, and everything about the eye is marvellous. If your eyelid were not there, you would go blind very quickly, because the front of your eyes would not be protected or kept wet or cleaned. If your eyelashes were not there, you would get things stuck in your eye much more often. The liquid in your eye is a very complex mix of things. It manages to have a mucus base with salty water on top and an oily water on top of it, an oily liquid on top of that to stop evaporation. It even contains an antibacterial agent to prevent infection. Did this all happen by chance? Can you begin to imagine a process of small changes by which you could move from an animal having no eye to an animal having an eye like ours? If evolution removes animals that are not competitive or features that are not used, how would the multiple components required by an eye ever be developed? Imagine a light-sensitive spot had somehow been developed. That would be complex enough, but what would come next? How do you ever get to the situation where we have a clear lens with a clear jelly between it and the light receptor? The eye has lots of bits and pieces which all need to be there for us to see. It's no use to have a lens but nothing to receive the light at the back of the eye. It's no use to have a lens in the back of your eye ready to see the light even if the jelly in your eye is thick and lets no light through it. So we have in the eye so much complexity. We have the eyelids, we have the eyelashes, we have the liquid around the eye, we have the clear lens, we have the clear liquid inside the eye, we have the retina to receive the light and make something of it. We have all sorts of things in this eye. It is not in any way simple, and it needs all of the pieces or it just doesn't work properly. So there are no observable facts that can suggest that eyes could ever develop step by step from nothing. Now let's look then at the ear. Once again, there is so much complexity and everything about our ear is magnificent. Do you ever feel dizzy? If your ears weren't so good at calculating your balance and movement, you'd feel dizzy all the time. Yet that, for the ear, is just a sideshow. It's mostly there so that we can hear, isn't it? So much complexity. There's the eardrum, there's the hammer, the anvil, the stirrup, all of these things necessary for us to hear. Then we have the canals for balance. We have drain tubes to make sure that our ears don't get full of gunk. And when these tubes get blocked, children can end up going deaf. It's important that all of these things are there, or even the most complex machinery will be ruined. Can you imagine how you would build an ear from scratch? How you would add one small piece at a time that was big enough as a change to benefit, to help you survive over other animals, and would allow you then to survive more effectively for thousands or millions of years until the next major improvement could come along, gifted from some deity called chance. There are no observable facts to indicate that ears can develop step by step from nothing. There's a quote from a man called Perry Marshall. He says, "Some people believe in God with a capital G. Some people believe in chance with a capital C." And I think he makes a powerful point here. I believe in God with a capital G. He's a God who is much more powerful than I am. He can understand things that are beyond me. He can plan things I cannot imagine. He can live on forever. Those who believe in evolution believe in random chance, that can achieve, in their judgment, much more than I can, or you can, or any humans have ever managed to achieve. And so this random, unguided chance can achieve an organised complexity much greater than our intelligence has ever achieved. We're still only scratching the surface of understanding the complexity that is around us. Yet people can believe that all of this around us, has come from stupid, unguided chance. If that is the case, why would anyone ever struggle to understand something? According to this sort of a theory, utter stupidity with no understanding is vastly smarter than our intelligence. So why is this believed, despite being so incredible? Well, Sir Arthur Keith, he was a Scottish anatomist and anthropologist. He was a person who made this comment, "Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation, and that is unthinkable." Another comment. "The truth is that evolution was a hypothesis which hardened into dogma before it had been thoroughly analysed. Hence, it mothered a number of fallacies." So these, I think, sum up quite clearly why people believe in evolution. It's because the alternative is not acceptable to them. Now let's read on then to what the Bible says about creation. The Bible tells us right from the start of the first book that God created the heavens and the earth. So leaving aside for the moment the argument about whether a creator was involved or not, this sentence tells us that the universe, including our earth, came into existence at a point called the beginning. Now, some Bible students suggest that there could be a time gap between those words, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," and "Now the earth was formless and void," or was without form and void. So they think that the Bible could be saying that the universe was made some unspecified time before the planet Earth came to be how it is now. If it's intended to make the Bible match scientific theories more, then personally I can't see how this helps. The first verse says, God created the heaven and the earth at the beginning. Both at the same time. It's called the beginning. Whereas the Big Bang Theory predicts the earth would not form for about another 9 billion years after the heavens, or 8 or 9 billion years after the heavens were created. So it hasn't really helped, has it? I think it's also worthwhile us then looking at some verses from the Law of Moses. Now, the Law of Moses included God's rules for his people, and one of the places in that he is giving the law that they are to keep the Sabbath, and he says why they are to keep a Sabbath in Exodus chapter 20 verses 8 to 11. I won't read all of it, I'll just read verse 11. For in 6 days, this is the reason behind the Sabbath, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So a delay then between those two parts of the first verse doesn't really fit, I think, with the descriptions that are in either Genesis chapter 1 or in Exodus chapter 11, which is said again in Exodus chapter 31, verse 17 as well. So then, the days of creation. Let's move on to look at those. Genesis 1 describes the creation occurring in 6 different steps. At the beginning of each of those steps, it states that God gave verbal instructions as to what was to happen. So the words God said start off each day. And we've emphasised that it doesn't say in great detail how it happened. It just confirms that God's word was carried out. God spoke, it happened. And so at the end of each day, there is the comment, and it was so. So this comment, and it was so, is the fact that what shows that God is a God who is able to do so much more than we are able to do. If you like, we've been trying to emulate that sort of thing ever since. So we have kings who will say the word, and then you'll have thousands of slaves going and trying to do it. Whereas what we read of in the Bible is God speaks and it happens. Now in this description of creation, the earth really is put as the centre of it all, the focus of everything that is being described. So that even the sun, the moon, the stars, they are all described because of their effect on the earth, rather than for their own reasons, their own existence. So then, if we go quickly through what the days of creation covered, we're told on day 1, apart from what we've already looked at, it says, "Let there be light," in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3. And then we're told that God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And so now this has revealed light to show what was on the earth. And we're told that yet at that time what was on the earth was all just a disorganised, a disorganised mess. And what came then with the second day was, let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water. And so God calls the expanse sky, and if you like, the canvas has been prepared for now the addition of life to the earth. The third day, the instructions were, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds. So here we have life, plant life, vegetation flourishing in the environment as it was at that stage. Yet still the light is only provided by God. Here, in the fourth day then, we have, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky, to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. Then we have the fifth day, and the instruction, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky. And so we have life in the sea and in the air. Then day 6, and the great project, if you like, is coming to an end. Let the earth produce living creatures, according to their kinds. Here then is the pinnacle of God's creation. Livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals according to their kinds. And then, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. Mankind put in charge of everything that is on the earth, living and not living. So the land animals appear in this last day. Man last of all, And whereas there are many of all of the different animals, the different fish, birds, the different trees, instead of that you have just one man and one woman. And what's more, created in the image and likeness of God. So, the Bible then tells us that everything came into existence in 6 days. And at the end of the first day it said there was evening and there was morning, the first day. And there are similar statements at the end of each of the other days. And the statements seem to be telling us that the days are all the same length, aren't they? Now we'll go on to look at day just briefly. The Bible uses the word day. Normally it's referring to a 24-hour period, and some people do argue that it can occasionally refer to longer time periods. But what about the other words then that might help us decide whether it really means day or not? As I say there, the word appears about 2,300 times as the word day, and in almost all cases seems to refer to a 24-hour period. So the other things that are used in this creation record, we're told there was evening and there was morning frequently. And when we look at the words mean evening and morning. In the Hebrew, when they're translated into English, those are precisely the meanings that they have. So evening means evening. Morning means morning, night, as is also used in Genesis chapter 1. Night also refers to night. So when we read through Genesis chapter 1, the simple reading of the creation record, I think, is very clear. Now, the Bible is not a textbook, a science textbook. None of the many passages that there are in the Bible tell us exactly how God's word turned into something existing. But what we are told is that that was all part of God's plan for human beings on the earth. And that God's purpose was what actually mattered. So the Bible is concerned about why we are here, what God's plan with his creation is. Our earth had a beginning. At one stage in our planet's history, it was uninhabited, it was covered with water. Then life appeared, and it came in stages, one day after another, with mankind appearing last of all and appearing just as one man and one woman. And we do need to consider then that if we look at the observable facts of science, there is no conflict with the Bible. Where the problems come in are when we have... Sorry, can people still hear me? Okay. Sorry, we've had...
We can hear you, Brother Mark, but we
Yes.
can't see the video.
No, we've had a problem. I'll just have to quickly change my logging in. It will take me probably about a minute or so to fix up, because one way or another I've ended up being logged out as the main user. So I'm just about to log in again, and then the problems should go away. Sorry. Back to meeting. Okay. Now I should be able to go back to sharing my screen. Okay, there. I hope that people can go back to seeing that then.
Yeah, we can see that now. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll just restart the recording. Right. Okay, I think we should then be back to where we were. Sorry about that. So, the Bible tells us then about how we got here. We talked about how our earth had a beginning and that the world started uninhabited, covered with water, and that life came in stages, one day at a time. And that if we look at the observable facts of science rather than interpretation and opinion, there is no conflict with the Bible. Okay, it appears that that has stopped, so I think then it's probably easiest if I just say, I think we've covered all that we need to cover with that. I had another couple of things to say, but that will be fine. So, based on that, that subject that we have talked about, I think now if there are any questions, then please ask questions. I'll just stop this recording